Backfire.com, the Republican candidate for governor.
Have sexual relations with
I realize that this is something he is
We're not going to be able to solve our problems if we get distracted by sideshows and carnival barkers.
One Republican, one Democrat, and you discuss the issues that matter in today's local, state, national, and global politics. Hosted by Steve Hickson with co-hosts John Stanberry and Franklin Chansey. This is Backfire.
Hey, good morning. We're back. Everybody wake up. Backfire's alive this morning. Good morning, everybody.
Woo.
Woo.
Whatever that was.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Woo.
It's a little woo.
A little bit.
Woo. Everybody awake from the eclipse?
Yeah, actually.
What do you think?
You know what? Few things that get as much hype as that actually live up to it, and I thought it was spectacular to watch. Really interesting.
It's pretty amazing to me that they can tell you to the minute what time this is going to happen.
Not only that, they could tell you that 3 or 4 years ago. That whole science thing is pretty impressive.
Well, I don't know. I'm maybe not as enthusiastic as you all.
You didn't watch it?
I did watch it, and it was very impressive, but I was reading a story in the Atlantic Monthly, which is a prestigious, magazine, more of the liberal persuasion, and, well, quite frankly, it's pretty clear the eclipse is actually racist, according to the Atlantic. It didn't cross the path of enough black Americans. Now, they're not sure. You think I'm making this up. This is not actually satire. This is actually from the Atlantic. It has been dubbed the Great American Eclipse, and along most of its path, there live almost no black people. Presumably, this is not explained by the implicit bias of the solar system. Still, an eclipse chaser is always tempted to believe that the skies are relaying a message. Franklin, your people have lost their mind. The eclipse is racist now.
I'm going with that was likely some satire.
No, it's not. It's a 10-page article in the Atlantic. It's not satire. You people have lost your mind.
Well, I think that the Democrats have a problem with their far left people, and I think the Republicans have a problem with their far right people. So,
well, the difference is the far right was never part of the Republican Party. The far left is the basis foundation right now for the Democrat. Nancy Pelosi's about as far left as they come, and she's the leader of the party.
What's your opinion,
that was
Franklin?
Breathtaking in its scope, what he just I've heard of painting with a wide brush.
By the way, the fascists were a product of the left. Time magazine made Mussolini the man of the year in the 1920s before they started mass murdering people and decided maybe that wasn't good PR for them.
Okay.
All right. Franklin came in here this morning. He's carrying some paperwork and said he had some local information for us. So, Franklin,
well, first of all, I learned something really interesting yesterday.
All right.
You may remember last week we were talking about the controversy over the sheriff's budget,
right?
And I made the comment that I would like to hear what Mylan Blake, the chairman of the committee, had to say. Because I hadn't read any the finance committee of the county commission, because I hadn't seen any quotes of his. And it turns out that Commissioner Blake actually listens to Backfire. I got a call from him this week, and
he's listened to it for years. He's been up.
He's been up here. He has.
Come on.
But I didn't know he was continuing to do that. Most people get over their bad habits eventually.
I think they keep saying
we're a bad habit, Franklin.
It's pretty amazing.
That's right.
To me, in fact, do listen to this.
Apparently, you didn't read the little Surgeon General's warning on the front
about
of the
us.
Okay. And he called. He wanted to know what questions that I had, and I just asked him, what was some of the information that was actually leading to why questions were being asked. And he provided me the budgeting information for the Justice Center for the food services there, which is one of the issues that had been under concern. The budget for that is $390,000 a year. That's the same it was under Sheriff Ruth, by the way. It hadn't changed in terms of the amount of the budget, but there are some things that have changed. That budget almost entirely is for feeding prisoners, and that had been done through a company called Aramark Services for all that period of time. Shortly, a year, perhaps a year, 3/4 of a year after the change in that, there started to be some issues with in administration. There began to be for the first time, some other things being paid out of that line item that previously had not been happening. And it started out, relatively small. The Chattanooga Gas Company, Wholesale Supply Group, things like that. But then in 2015, they began to have some significant issues. And what brought all this to the fore was that the county attorney's office received a call from lawyers for Aramark Services. And they had not been paid in 5.5 months. It was over $150,000 in bills, invoices that hadn't been paid. They were told that there was apparently some dispute over some invoice somewhere, and at least according to the department, they were withholding payment. So they actually had to go in and kind of negotiate with these folks and get them to hold off and to look for money in other places in the sheriff's department's budget to try and cover this, and I think maybe even negotiate it with them a little bit to try to accept a little bit more. And that's what got these folks started looking at this. And when you look at the line items or the invoices that were being paid from this, you get lots of them that don't appear to have anything to do at all with food services for inmates. There's an Fire and Life Safety America Incorporated, Aiken's Gas Company, Echo Lab.
Well, Aiken, I'm going to go through this with you. Aiken's Gas Company would be like a propane provider, I think.
Well, I understand that, but
I mean, that could be used for cooking.
Hobart.
Hobart would be a stove, refrigerator.
Okay.
That's kitchen appliance stuff.
Okay, well, this is the food service budget.
Well, that's what I'm.
The equipment.
That's equipment. Well, that would be used as part of their food services. U.S.
Prisoner Transport, Shields Electronic Supply. Eventually, they stopped using Aramark and switched over to a company called Trinity, Command Communications, $20,643. Bob Barker Company, $6,000. I don't know what that is, and it could have something to do with that. But as you go through it, there's lots of other things like that. That there was no real example for how they managed to do that. So that's what presented all of these questions, and these are just the line item payments. The invoices for all of them have not been received yet. And so this ad hoc group that's going to look into this is going to go in and ask for cooperation to see what the invoices were, see how they did that. They managed to somehow, the majority of this bill that got paid to Aramark that had been disputed, they then found it in the next year's budget, which then raises questions of where the money that they found, how are they paying for the other invoices? So it's an accounting issue that at least seems to me, and frankly my impression, although that's not what he said, was that the chairman of the county commission's finance committee is taking it seriously and not looking at it with any kind of agenda, but legitimately feels like there's an oversight function they're supposed to perform, and there are just too many questions in this to not look into it. Now, does that mean it's all above board? Certainly could be. And Commissioner Blake, to his credit, made no allegations or accusations whatsoever. He just said, if you want to know why we're asking questions, here's some of the reasons why we're asking questions. And I frankly was impressed with how serious he was being about it.
Well, that's good, and I'm glad that they're getting to the bottom of it. The problem is they make it seem like a witch hunt. It comes after this investigation follows that investigation. This investigation it's a witch hunt towards the sheriff by one person. I'm thinking that keeps pushing the bubble. Now then, I think the person who keeps making all the noise is hurting everybody else that's trying to get to the bottom of facts like that. You know, has anybody sat down with the sheriff and asked him about these things, and what was the answer?
Well, I don't know the answer to that yet.
Well,
But this information, they've only received it in the last month.
I probably take a little different tact on that, Steve. I think they ought to be doing this to all the budgets across the county. I will tell you that this has been a problem ongoing for a long time with lots of budgets. They're supposed to come before the county commission and request a line item change for anything they do that spends money out of the wrong line item. They're supposed to come back before the commission and say, hey, we put this in this line item. Here's where, we said we were going to spend it. We now need to move it from this line item to that line item. This happens all the time. So, I think that sometimes you get commissioners that are willing to say, hey, I'm not going to put up with this, and they get a lot more of the attention, but I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
Well, I've been on committees and so forth that we've had to vote to take things from one line item and put them into another.
Well, they're
line
supposed to. The commission is supposed to vote.
There's a clear trail of what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Right. That's right.
The issue here is it's many, many thousands and thousands of dollars that are going to things that, at least on the surface, don't appear to be related to food services, laundry service on here.
Now, there's an argument to be made. Keep in mind, I end up on both sides, and I end up making both sides mad pretty regularly. There's an argument to be made that all of these county elected officials are duly elected constitutional authorities, and that it's too cumbersome to come back to the county commission for every single, small movement you need to do within your budget. You can make that argument, but the fact of the matter is, right now, as I understand it, at least, they're supposed to come back and ask for a vote when they move money out of one line item into another line item.
At the very least, there ought to be a clear memorandum or something written that explains why you've done something.
I agree.
Now, keep in mind, I also support zero-based budgeting. And I will tell you, the vast majority of people that I am good friends with and that I support their election and re-election up in the courthouse aren't happy with the concept of zero-based budgeting. They don't want to have to come before the commission every year and justify their budget. Now, they have actually very valid, legitimate points. Some of them generate their own income up there. They're fee-based offices. They generate their own income. So the question is, why do I have to come before the county and justify my budget when I generate my budget? And there's also the argument that it's very cumbersome. It'll take a lot of time. It'll eat up a lot of their workload and effort to do that every year. But those are the kind of things that could be worked out. For example, there's been suggestions that we rotate it. And so every department doesn't have zero-based budgeting every year, but it rotates. Every couple of years, different departments come before the commission and justify their budget. And folks, the reason I push zero-based budgeting, like on the federal level, in World War I, we started the Strategic Helium Reserve. So we had enough helium for our dirigibles that we were using in World War I. We didn't get rid of the Strategic Helium Reserve until 2000 and either 3 or 4. It was $800 million. by the time we got rid of
That
it.
was probably back when they were still flying those balloons, wasn't it?
It was in World War I. We didn't even fly them in World War II. But in 2003 or 4, we still had a strategic helium reserve.
John, do you know the government's full of things like that?
Well, my point is zero-based budgeting would take care of a lot of things like that, because you come before and you go, last year we needed X amount of dollars for this. We don't need it anymore. And so we do away with that. And we move the money somewhere else where it does more good. That's what zero-based budgeting would do. But the office holders in the courthouse are not wrong to say that it's also very cumbersome and it takes a lot of time. So we have to figure out whether there's a good balance there or not.
With respect to what we were just talking about, keep in mind, this is one line item of $390,000 in a $15 million budget. But if you find this many issues being paid from at least appearing to be outside of what's budgeted for the line item, I think that probably legitimately makes you want to look at the rest of the budget to see how that's being handled. Now, again, it could turn out that nothing's wrong here other than maybe some internal record-keeping practices that aren't the best way of doing it. But
does the sheriff
worth
does
looking
the
at.
sheriff have someone that
well, he
handles
had
the
somebody
finance?
originally, Mr. McAllister, as I recall, but he got reassigned.
Well, there's always a
years
budget
ago.
director. There's someone in charge of the
So I
budget.
don't know who the person who does it.
Well, you know, excuse me, you're talking about the food services that were owed the money that are not working there. Evidently, there was the discrepancy in an invoice. Well, typically, you pay your bills, but if there's discrepancy, that particular item, you might hold it out. That there's discrepancy with, but you don't not pay the whole bill.
Well, I understand almost everything that's listed on here would seem to fall under another line item. Okay, so, there's something that arguably could be appliance repair on here.
Right.
Okay. Well, there's going to be an equipment budget for the Justice Center. We know that. So there may be a perfectly good reason for that. But on the other hand, U.S. prisoner transport, or there was a $20,000 one to Command Communications. That's a big payment. So you wonder what the issue is with respect to that. So I think they're going to look at it, but I don't think they're going to look at it with an agenda. I think they're going to look at it with what's exactly happening in here and how are we doing it. Now,
And keep in mind, too, one of the complaints about the concept of having a forensic audit was the cost. This is the county commission
they're doing
trying
it
to do
themselves.
their job.
This is
And
not
that's their
this is not the
fiduciary
$35,000. This is them doing it.
That's good.
Now look, this
Now, keep in mind, this is them doing it, people who have other jobs that get paid actually very little to do what they're doing.
now this
Well, let me ask something. Why don't they pull in the person who handles the finances and the budget for them and ask them?
one people now.
Huh?
It's going to be more than one person now. Now, this situation, doing it informally like this, is going to be completely dependent on the degree of cooperation that goes between the two departments. That's how it'll be. Without the cooperation, they won't be able to accomplish it that way. But they went back and looked at the whole year before the sheriff went into office, and none of those are in there. They're all straight line item payments for the food services budget on it. So that's the seed from which this issue has sprung.
Well, I guess I'm glad they're not blowing $35,000 here until they get to the bottom of where the need is.
If there's enough cooperation, it may not be necessary.
And
If there's not, then I think you may end up seeing that expenditure.
Also, wouldn't the state get involved if they
Eventually, the state comptroller would become involved.
Well, I mean,
that's right.
There wouldn't need to be
that's
expense.
not necessarily
No,
free either.
You don't. The comptroller doesn't wade in every county in every incident.
Well, I mean, he would if he thinks there's a
Yeah,
discrepancy.
but how do you find that? And again,
Well, the
I think
way they're
that falls
doing it.
back to what we're talking about.
I think that's the way they're doing it right now. If they can't get the answers to the bottom of it, I think they turn it over to state controller and say, we've got a problem.
Now, I will tell you, I wish that we had a more comprehensive audit system in the state in the first place for every department. For example, the auditor that audits Bradley County works in Bradley County, lives in Bradley County, and works up there in the same office buildings of the people he's auditing. As I understand it, the tax appraisers, they have to be audited, but they actually have a rule that they can't be audited by someone who lives in their home county. They, the auditors for the tax appraisers can only audit outside counties because they don't want someone who goes to church with you, goes to, kids go to school together. They don't want that influence, but that doesn't happen on the county level. So I wish the comptroller's office or whoever's in charge of that process would institute those same rules for the general audit. I don't think that someone who works in the same suite of offices with all, the county officials should be auditing those same officials. He ought to be auditing Polk County officials or Hamilton County or Meigs County, just like the requirement for the tax appraisers audits.
Good thoughts. Anything else locally?
Well, not a very favorable editorial in the paper this morning about the state over the last 4 or 5 years of law enforcement in Bradley County. Doesn't really paint us in a very positive light. Not just the more recent things, but kind of reviews several issues that have arisen over the last few years.
In the city as well, is that
Both,
what they're...
yeah, both are listed on there.
City and county?
Yeah.
Well, we could probably write something about the Chattanooga Police Department too.
You might could. You might could. But they had a scandal with their sheriff a few years ago too. But he went to prison over it. So.
Yeah, but the vast majority of the things that have been pretty egregious have been in the city police department, which, by the way, the last year and a half or so
been pretty quiet.
has done a really good job of kind of changing that impression. Mm-hmm. I think the new chief's doing an excellent job. I think the men and women are serving honorably there, and I think things have changed a lot.
Well, as far as our police protection, city and county, it seems to be good around here.
Surprisingly, the statistics for Cleveland are scary, and it's a little hard to kind of understand how that pans out. But the statistics actually look really bad for us.
When you say statistics, you're talking about crimes?
We're talking about crime. We're actually ranked as one of the higher crime cities.
There is no way that we can be ranked higher than Memphis.
We're not as high as Memphis, but we're surprisingly high.
Well, what's our rating in the state of Tennessee size-wise now?
County used to be 13 years ago.
No, we went up to 12.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we've gone to 11 or not, but we've certainly 12, I think.
95.
95. Mm-hmm.
But, Chattanooga used to be 4. Is it still 4?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
The only thing that's happened is Nashville has passed Memphis as the largest city in the state. We've been gaining on the Chattanooga's been gaining on Knoxville. It has not caught it yet, but has narrowed that gap fairly substantially.
Mm-hmm. I liked it when they had the license tags and had the number of the county.
Yeah, I did too. Does Chattanooga lose out in that race though because of the Georgia border?
Probably. Yeah. If you were talking about a metropolitan area, it wouldn't surprise me if Chattanooga was larger than Knoxville.
Wonder why they changed the county number.
Each governor has the authority to change what they want on the license tag. That's why you see license tags change. The governors want their mark. They want their style of license tag. Now that may have been statute by the state legislature. I don't know.
I'd say they probably got some people wanting to put their names on their license plates, so they had to change all that.
I think it had something to do with.
It may have been longevity of the plates too.
Well, that's true because if you forget, we went from 19th to 12 over about
which means everybody in Bradley County has to change their tag.
Yeah.
All right, I want to ask a couple of sincere questions and try to get some response from both of y'all. What is going on with all this hatred right now? What's causing the hatred?
identity politics. We've divided ourselves not based on America, not based on, I'm from the South, you're from the North. It's you're black, I'm white, you're Asian, I'm this, you're liberal, I'm conservative.
But what's caused this?
Because politicians on both sides generate support by dividing populations. And so they've put their reelection and their engendering of support ahead of national unity and national image.
What's your opinion, Franklin? I'm trying to be sincere about this. We've got a real problem.
I think some of what John said is true. I think that we have been in this. We have lost the ability to stop and contemplate issues long enough to actually understand them and consider the other side of issues. We are stuck in this, I started to say 24-hour news cycle, but it's almost like an 8-hour news cycle because you've got Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everybody weighing in their opinions immediately, whereas before you used to get information many times a day late, and other people had time to think about it before they made statements. Now, as soon as something happens, somebody grabs a senator or a congressman coming off the floor and expects them to give a thoughtful answer immediately. And the easy way to do that is to default to a canned, ideological answer that really isn't very thoughtful at all. But it sounds good, and we got it out very quickly. And that then, and you've got the talk radio and talk television and so forth immediately expressing what the conservative or the liberal view is that day. And as I've said for a long time on here, 90% of the issues that we have now divided up as liberal and conservative never were divided up that way before. There were conservative issues, but they were limited to one part of our government, and there were liberal issues that were a relatively small amount, and everything else was open for discussion and debate and being talked about, and now we don't have that.
Would you agree, though, that we've had a real chilling effect on debate? And now, look, I obviously we all see things from our side, and you may see it from your side, just a reflection of what I'm going to say. But conservatives, I think, have been targeted much more often with, if I give an opinion, it's not that you disagree with my opinion. I'm racist. I'm evil. I want poor people to starve to death. I want children to not have a quality education. Instead of just saying, I don't think that's the right way to do it, we attack the person's motives. And it's very hard to have an open conversation like that.
I don't think that there's much difference between the two parties in that respect.
Well, Franklin, for example, now, if I tell you, and I truly believe this, the Antifa people are just as violent, if not more so, just as hateful, just as destructive as the Ku Klux Klan people. I can tell you that I've seen all over the news anybody that says anything about how violent Antifa is immediately is attacked as defending the Ku Klux Klan, defending racism. I can say that Antifa is evil and still completely believe that the Ku Klux Klan is evil, but not in today's environment among the progressive left. And the real danger here is not the progressive left and the conservative right. The danger is the media. The media decides how an image is portrayed, how a politician is portrayed. That's the power that we're trying to figure out how to deal with.
How did white supremacists, KKK,
look, the KKK...
wait a minute, let me finish. All these things that we keep talking about, how did they become Republican issues?
Well, the KKK...
They were always Democrats.
They were Democrats.
Nobody said that was a Republican issue this week.
The press does. For example, any pundit who comes out and condemns Antifa gets attacked for... Supposedly, they said, "Oh, well, you're equating, and you can't do that." Well, yes, you can.
Well, you probably can condemn Antifa. there's probably a question about when you ought to do
What
it.
is
All right, well, let me
Antifa?
ask
What
you a
is
question,
wait a minute? What is Antifa?
It's a group that began in Europe, and it's short for anti-fascist. Because there were the fascist party, Mussolini,
and they
and so
employ
forth.
fascist tech.
Was
Is
it
this part of the Rent-A-Mob group?
Well, actually, George Soros does fund a lot of it.
Okay, that's
Frankly,
called a
he
Rent-A-Mob.
does.
I call that Rent-A-Mob.
He does fund them. But frankly, let me give you an
Why
example.
would he fund them?
You say this doesn't happen. CNN this week, this was the headline for a article that they published. Unmasking the leftist Antifa movement. Activists seek peace through violence. Okay? And they go on in the piece to document all the acts of violence that Antifa does. Do you know what happened to that headline?
I don't know.
Antifa complained, and CNN edited the headline and changed it to unmasking the leftist Antifa movement. Dropped all commentary about violence from the headline because Antifa complained. Now, if they had done the similar reverse thing with the Ku Klux Klan or with the alt-right and the alt-right had complained, do you have any serious belief that CNN would have altered the headline for them?
Probably not.
That's what I'm talking about. The media chooses which side to elevate and which side to condemn, and that's where actually the politicians are following the lead of the media because they see the power of the media. They know they have to try to get reelected, apparently, and so they play the game.
That's the swamp. The
It is
re-election
swamp, but
crap
my point
is the
is,
swamp.
you're reacting to what the media is going to do to you.
Well, the swamp should not react to the media. That's our problem.
Well, that's pretty hard to do.
Well,
I'll be honest.
I bet you term limits would take care
Term
of it.
limits might actually make a difference on that because it removes some of the concern about the impact that the media is going to
Hold
do.
your thoughts. We got to take a break. We'll be right back.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson. We'll be right back after this.
You are listening to WOOP-LP, Cleveland, Tennessee. WOOP FM is a broadcasting service of the Traditional Music Resource Center, and we play America's original music.
There goes the myth again.
Is it time for a new ride? At Buy Here, Pay Here USA, for just $500 today, you can drive it away. Come by any of our 4 locations in Chattanooga, Cleveland, Dayton, and Dalton, Georgia, and find your new ride. For just $500 down, you can drive it away today. Remember, all our vehicles have passed a 200-point inspection and come with a 6-month, 6,000-mile warranty. And you get a free Carfax report and appraisal on your vehicle. Visit us at BuyHerePayHereUSA.com. Offer subject to credit approval. See store for details. We are Buy Here, Pay Here USA.
This is Teresa Gilbert from the Village Bake Shop in Cleveland, Tennessee. Do you have a birthday, wedding, or anniversary coming up and want that perfect cake? Need some donuts to sweeten up your coworkers? Want to surprise your sweet thing with a bag of cookies? Then come on over to the Village Bake Shop. Family operated since 1961. The Village Bake Shop is your first and last stop for fresh baked goods that will feed your sweet tooth. The Village Bake Shop located at the Village Green Town Center. The phone number here is 423-476-5179. See you soon.
Matthews Pool and Spa Company, located in Cleveland, Bradley County for over 45 years. You know them. They're your new swimming pool construction and supply company in Cleveland, Tennessee, now with 4 generations of Matthews to serve you. Matthews Pool and Spa Company, for over 45 years, your swimming pool construction and supply company, spa or hot tub installation and maintenance. Get all of your supplies for your pool or spa right now. And that's the new location in the old Quinn Electric Company building behind KFC at 2724 Keith Street in Cleveland. Call Matthews now, 476-4521. You better get your order in now for your new pool construction for this spring and summer. 476-4521. Matthews Pool and Spa Company. Gonna jump in. Woo!
Train engineers put our heating and cooling products for almost every test imaginable. So while you're sending your kids to school, they're sending 10,000 volts through a compressor. Testing like this is the reason Train is so reliable. And why our engineers prefer their steaks, well, Well done.
Ready to indulge in trained comfort? Call a trained comfort specialist at Mechanical Systems, 336-5739. High-quality service and installation for more than 30 years.
It's hard to stop a train. Really hard.
Hey, this is Frodaddy. Are you out of work? Are you looking for a job? Or are you just looking for a career change? Call my friend Chris today at Advantage Resourcing, the #1 staffing agency in the Cleveland, Athens, Dayton, and Chattanooga area. You can reach Chris at 296-1916. That's 296-1916. And tell him Frodaddy sent you. With jobs open right now from $11.50 an hour to $24 an hour, you can't afford not to call him. Call Chris today, 296-1916 at Advantage Resourcing, or check them out online at apply.advantageresourcing.com. That's apply.advantageresourcing.com. And tell Chris I said hi. Financial Recovery, licensed and bonded collection agency, located right here in Cleveland, Tennessee. Give them a call at 423-473-7670. Small town service with big city results. A full service medical, commercial, retail, and individual collection service. Celebrating 10 years in business. Call Financial Recovery at 423-473-7670 to help you with your accounts receivable and past due invoices. Financial Recovery, 423-473-7670.
Today there's things disappearing that I worked for all my life. I dread having to start again with just my children and my wife. I wanna thank some lucky stars for trying to bring our greatness back today. 'Cause the flag used to stand for freedom, and now they're trying to take that away. We're gonna make America great again. We're gonna set our country free from the destruction by the party, taking freedom away from me. And I'll proudly stand up next to Trump and support him here today, 'cause there ain't no doubt.
You're listening to Backfire with Steve Hickson on Whoop FM. Call 423-614-5553 to join in on the conversation. Now, back to Backfire.
Let's make America great again. That was the theme last night's speech. But let me ask you before we get into some of that. The NFL Cleveland Brown team had 12 of their team take a knee during the national anthem. I know it's a free country and people can do what they want to do. But what is their problem? What are they protesting?
Well, you can't bring up a generation or two through a school system that decides to be a glass half empty when it comes to America's greatness in the world and not expect consequences. So these people have all come up through a school system that has taught them that America is to blame for all the problems of the world. Now, never mind that the rest of the world, for example, in the slavery issue, the rest of the world was all participating in slavery, and we actually were the spearhead that brought about the end of it. Never mind that ISIS has operating slave markets as we speak going on. If those people really wanted to do something about slavery, they'd be working to try and end modern day slavery. But they're taking a knee and making a big deal out of it.
I don't even understand what they're protesting. You know, it's just,
America's bad. That's what they're saying.
I think the owners of the NFL teams need to get these guys to sign a contract. And if they do,
you'll have to get agreement among the owners. Not all the owners agree.
Well,
some do, some don't.
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you how to make them agree. I quit watching NFL football last year.
Their viewership has declined drastically.
Well, I think more people ought to quit watching pro football. This is getting ridiculous.
Well, you want to know really?
These overplayed.
Did you hear what ESPN has now done?
Oh yeah, that was.
They pulled
Robert Lee.
They pulled a play-by-play announcer from a game in Virginia because his name was Robert Lee. Now he's Asian. His last name is Lee because he's an Asian American.
What about this? Frank, what's going on with this kind of
Robert Lee, Asian American, can't officiate.
I saw that story, but I couldn't find it duplicated by anyone other than the original source. So I'm not saying it's wrong. I saw it. I thought that's incredibly silly.
That's where we're at in America.
But I don't know if it's accurate or not. If that's
well, they were talking about it last night in the news.
Well, look, I've got a list of 8 monuments that have been destroyed. Tell me why the President Lincoln bust in Chicago has been vandalized twice now. Tell me why the Holocaust memorial has been vandalized twice.
What's caused this? What has brought this on? We've had these monuments for hundreds of years.
Well, now Franklin was actually, I think, correct last week. We can have a discussion of the context, and some of these monuments were placed immediately after the Civil War, and that's one thing. Right. Some of these monuments were placed in the 20s and 30s for completely different reasons. That's a different discussion.
Sure.
But most of the monuments that are being destroyed are actually old monuments that have been there.
What has brought this monument frenzy on all of a sudden?
Well, one, we've destroyed the rule of law. You know, you've got, now I'm going to say you've got Democrat mayors that are not having open forums. They're not having votes. They are either one of two things. They're having monuments removed in the dead of night, which in and of itself tells you there's a problem. Or two, they are allowing, like, for example, in Durham, the police officers stood by and watched a violent Antifa mob tear down a monument.
How can you let any protesters wear a mask?
Well, that's another problem. Why are you wearing a mask?
Yeah, Franklin. What should we do about protesters wearing masks? Shouldn't we could do something about that? Am I right or wrong?
Then you'd be profiling people in black masks.
I don't care.
Well,
if they're ashamed to show their face, they shouldn't be there.
Okay, that's a perfectly valid position.
Just to let you all know, the Robert Lee with ESPN, that is on Fox News, CNN, BBC.
I'm not doubting it. What I'm saying is, when I looked at it, the source for the story was all the same person.
Well, this also says he wasn't fired. He's been
No, he wasn't
moved.
fired. They just moved him to call another game outside of Virginia. They didn't want him calling the game in Virginia.
Oh, it would be a problem.
Because Robert Lee might upset people. But look, you've got...
What about the Missouri senator who urged Trump's assassination?
Well, now look...
He needs to be visited by the Secret Service.
Well, now look,
that's what should happen.
He was booted by all the committees he served.
Well, but now it's a woman. It's a woman.
Or she.
But now let me say this. You know, I get accused of being partisan. The chairman of the Democrat state party did call for her resignation. Several prominent Democrats in the state called for her resignation.
And they took away.
And she refused.
Yes. Well, what should happen next?
Well,
I don't know what the mechanisms are for removing somebody from office in Missouri. But yes, you know, you talked about, you know, remember 6 months ago or whatever, that Kathy Griffin, the community, she spent about a day and a half being interviewed by the Secret Service about that, because that's what they do with all these presidential threats when they happen, and that's how it should be.
Anyway, this senator's making apologies to Trump family and all these people now. You know, people have to be responsible for some of the things they say.
That's one of our problems. We've given a trophy for participation for decades now. We've told people they're not responsible for any of the bad decisions they make in life. So what that ends up breeding, it breeds this concept that I can do or say anything I want without any repercussions.
They're saying here that the senators should oust her from office if she does not resign.
And
do they just vote to do that?
It'll be based on the
whatever the law is in Missouri. I don't know.
Right.
I'm saying I don't think we have anything like that here, do we? Can
I think we need to make an example out of her.
Oust somebody?
Yeah, actually, I think that we have. I don't know what the laws are,
impeachment process or
yeah,
something?
there's our former district attorney, had he had another year on his term, would have been impeached.
Well, I'm talking about in the legislature. I don't know.
I do think there's a
There's an
procedure.
ouster provision.
I don't know what it is, but all the states handle that separately, however their constitution allocates.
Sure. But she deserves to be condemned for that, without question.
I think she ought to be removed from office. They need to vote.
If that's available, sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, the worst of it was she doubled down. When it first came out, she doubled down.
All right. Mr. Trump has made a couple of speeches in a couple of days. You want to talk about those a little bit? The troops continued fighting after Afghanistan. He's changed his mind from his political, what he was saying while he was running, but he said he did it after getting into office and understanding and learning all the facts of what's going on. So,
well, look, that ought to undercut some of the left's complaints that he's this crazy guy that doesn't care about anything and does whatever he wants to do. You know, basically what he said, he went back on a promise that was actually a pretty central promise to a lot of what his supporters wanted. And he said, look, I talked to generals, I talked to strategy people, and decided that it was too costly to do this, and we're going to have to stick this out.
And I think they've sharpened their point just a little bit on their era. They know where they're going and who they're going after now.
There were several things. He said, my original instinct was to pull out. And historically, I like following my instincts. But he said, I studied it in great detail and changed his mind. He said, first, our nation must seek an honorable, enduring outcome worthy of the sacrifices that we've made. Second, the consequences of a rapid exit are predictable and unacceptable, which is another thing he said during the campaign. And third, he concluded that the security threats in the broader region are immense.
What did you think about the speech last night? Anybody, did y'all watch it?
Yeah. Well, I thought the night before, without getting into the specifics of it, he made an effort to provide a presidential speech that appeared to be thoughtful and considered and so forth. Last night, I thought he reverted to acting like a petulant child. I don't get it. I don't understand. I'm not talking about policy yet. Mm-hmm. I just don't understand why. Well, it's like he couldn't take being presidential for more than 24 hours.
Well, let me ask you something. If you were the president and you had done the things he's done, he said everything he could say about these monuments and the protest.
I mean, not done everything he could have.
Well, I think he did. I think
all of us are different. I didn't agree with a lot of the things that Obama said and did, but I didn't try to make the country ungovernable.
Well, I think he's doing that himself.
No, you all are doing that, and the media is doing that.
Wait a minute. The president himself is the one. Let me finish. Right. The president himself is the one attacking the leader of his own Senate. The president himself is the one.
Mitch McConnell
is also attacking several senators whose votes he needs to do the things he wants to do.
Is there something wrong with what he said to him?
Well, if you want them to cooperate with you, I would say so.
Well, I mean, you know what?
There's certainly something wrong, and you know, it didn't get a lot of attention yet. It's going to.
What?
The reports were that Mitch McConnell has reported to several people that the president asked him to, quote, protect him on this Russia thing. That is actually a crime.
Mitch McConnell?
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell said what now? Where are you getting this information?
Reported to several aides that the president in this profane telephone call they had, that he said that to him.
I don't know that Mitch McConnell.
That would actually be a crime.
What crime would that be?
Yeah.
Obstruction of a congressional investigation.
No, that's not obstruction. Asking someone to protect me is not obstruction.
If the Congress is investigating you and you go to the superior of the people investigating you and say, I need you to protect me,
frankly,
that is arguably obstruction of justice.
That's your word, significant word there was arguably. Because the word protect can mean a lot of things. If I said I want you to protect me, what I would expect out of that is, Mitch, when you have a press conference, be careful how you word things. Be careful how you say things.
McConnell hadn't said anything about that.
But that's my point. The word protect can mean lots of things. If he said, Mitch, I want you to suppress this, that's a crime. If he said, Mitch, I want you to drop it, that's a crime.
I think you're the one who's
parsing
the words now.
For a party who allowed a serial sex predator to lie in federal court and get away with it, you don't have a lot of room in wanting to now have strict definition.
What was the definition that the Attorney General gave to the FBI agent to use?
What?
When she didn't want it to be called an investigation. A matter.
A matter.
Yeah. What's a matter? What's that? I mean, that goes.
Well, That would
Not an
be closer.
investigation,
That would
it's a
actually be closer to John's description of a purely political statement. When you say protect me.
Protect me is open-ended, Franklin. What Loretta Lynch did was actually give a directive of how to actually speak about
There
it.
are lots of criticisms you can make of Donald Trump, but one of them is not being clear when he wants to be is not one of the criticisms. In fact, he's probably too clear too often.
Well, let me ask you, do you think Trump's doing a good job?
No.
Of course he does.
Well,
I don't.
where is he doing a bad job?
I can't. Let's use last night as an example then.
Okay.
I think that is completely asinine. The idea that you're going to shut down the government over funding for a border wall. That is beyond. Even his own party was coming out last night going, no.
Was it asinine?
Oh, no.
Was it asinine when in the shutdown, which, to be honest, Obama actually did, but Republicans got the blame for? Was it asinine when Obama actually closed roads driving into the Black Hills to look at the Mount Rushmore exhibit? Was that asinine or vindictive or out of place? They closed the roads, Franklin. There was no reason to close the roads except to punish people, to punish the taxpayers. Obama did that. I remember you defending it.
Okay.
So no president has a lock on doing ridiculous, asinine things.
First of all, the Republicans have the ability to solve this problem.
How?
President Obama didn't have a majority in those.
Franklin, he instructed the Park Service. Matter of fact, we actually got emails that had his top people saying, make this as painful as possible.
As I just said.
Is that appropriate? Make this as painful as
possible.
You
could argue not.
But did you? Did you fuss at him the way you're fussing at Trump?
I thought he made a important point there that if you're going to shut down the government, here's what it means.
He actually blocked, crippled World War II vets from being able to roll their wheelchairs into the World War II memorial on the mall, Franklin. He put a fence. It cost more money to fence that memorial off than it would have to have left it alone. That is a petulant, vindictive man.
And what happened the next
guy.
day? The president made sure that was.
He did it. His people ordered it.
Well, do you think the media is
We're not talking about what his people did. We're talking about what the president said.
No, Franklin, he did it himself. He wasn't until it looked bad that he backed off.
Do you think the media is giving the platform to the hate groups?
Yes, both sides.
Do you think they are, Franklin? You watch television.
This is more attention than these Nazis have had in decades.
You can make that argument.
Well,
absolutely.
Then, would that irritate you if you were president and you couldn't get a word in because...
Well, the president had a very... Listen. Look, there's no other way to put this. Yeah. There is no bigger softball lofted at any president ever than to give him an opportunity to condemn Nazis. It's not that hard.
He did.
It's not even complicated.
He did condemn them.
He gave you a 30-minute speech last night.
Franklin, he condemned them that day, and then the press on Sunday.
There's a reason why 90% of the elected Republicans up there all immediately came out and said, this is absurd.
Yes, right, because of the power of the media. He did condemn them on Saturday. The media on Sunday then said he didn't condemn them explicitly enough, so he came back out on Monday and condemned them even more explicitly. You all, by the way,
and then came out the next day and took it all back.
At the Dylan Roof shooting, President Obama did not condemn white supremacists, did not condemn the hateful rhetoric of Dylan Roof, actually made a statement that he couldn't say anything until the investigation was complete. Where was the media condemnation of him then? Where?
The president was speaking at a funeral, John.
The president never condemned Dylan Roof as a white supremacist. He didn't condemn the hateful ideology. Never. Tell me where the condemnation from the media was on President Obama. Different standard.
No, it's not a different standard.
Absolutely. I brought you the quote.
It's not a different standard, John.
He didn't do what they're claiming Trump should have done. Tell me why that's not a different standard. They said
you don't see a difference between one lone wolf idiot and thousands of people
Well, one, there
with
weren't thousands.
Nazi armbands?
There weren't thousands.
Yes,
See,
there were.
What you just did is part of the problem. There were a couple dozen of the Nazi people out there, Franklin, and there was one crazy who drove his car in.
True,
and there were actually more Antifa thugs out there than there were Nazis.
I mean, Nazis are there in this country.
Well, actually, the number of them has something like quadrupled in the last 10 years.
That's
How
true.
about in the last 10 days, probably?
Well, the numbers have quadrupled and
I do know this.
All through Europe.
40-something white supremacist rallies were canceled this weekend, though.
Well, who's stirring up all this
Well, now,
hatred?
when you say white
Who's stirring up the hatred? Who is stirring up this hatred? Who's stirring
Well,
it up?
I don't know. Y'all said it was Obama. I don't see any Obama in the White House now.
Exacerbated the divisions in our country. He made it worse.
No, what you've got is a bunch of crackpot groups who are always looking for something to stir them up.
On both sides. That's the problem, Franklin.
Well,
the liberal media.
As far as I can tell, while I'm not here to defend Antifa, their purpose, though, is to oppose white supremacists and neo-Nazis.
So are you telling me that because they oppose Nazis that makes them okay?
No, I didn't say that. But I would say there's a difference between that and being a Nazi.
You think so?
Yes, I do.
Who was the greatest killer of Nazis in the 20th century?
Probably
Joseph Stalin. And he is a murdering thug who the New York Times, by the way, covered up the forced starvation of millions of people in the Ukraine and won a Pulitzer Prize for it because they didn't want to give a bad name to communism. But my point here, Franklin, is we can say Joseph Stalin killed lots of Nazis. It doesn't make Joseph Stalin a good person.
Didn't say
the Antifa people are anti.
No. See, here's the problem. No,
you're right. That's
the
great
problem,
to be
John.
anti-Nazi, but they're just as bad as thugs.
You wouldn't have mentioned Antifa, but for the fact they got into a dispute with some Nazis.
I've been talking about them for weeks, Franklin. Been talking about they burned down Seattle. And by the way, the guy who organized the Charlottesville rally 4 years ago was a member of the Occupy movement and an Obama supporter. That's a strange flip-flop in a 4-year period.
And why would we allow anybody to protest wearing a mask?
Because it's not against the law,
why would
whether
CNN,
you like it or not.
I think we ought to make it against the law.
Okay, do that.
Why would CNN change an accurate headline because a bunch of people who have been proven to be violent demanded that they change the headline? What does that say about CNN's objectivity?
I don't know. They removed somebody and fired somebody this week for writing an anti-Trump headline they thought was unfair and fired him. Did anybody on that website you're looking at report that?
Actually, it wasn't a website.
I don't know where you got it, but I'm saying is, did you come across that?
No, I'll look
that up. Well, they did, though.
Well, great.
Who did? I want to know more about it.
CNN.
They did what?
They fired somebody for putting a inaccurate headline about President Trump on a story.
Well, it must have been
took
something
it down the same day and fired the person.
It must have been something they got caught with. Because if they hadn't been caught, they would have just kept saying
Well, understand that news organizations, like everybody else, have people who are doing things day to day. The people at the top aren't necessarily making the decision on what headline goes on this story, but when they learn about it, that's when they should do
something. It was the problem the people at the top set the direction. For example, you've got lots of stories coming out of ESPN that a lot of the people feel intimidated because of the leadership at ESPN. Which, by the way, is killing their own viewership because people want to watch sports. They don't want sports infused with politics.
Well, last night I flipped the channel back and forth between the two stations just to see what was going on. CNN, while the president was speaking, had a thing across the bottom talking about the rioting outside.
Of course.
Crowds rioting outside. Now, Trump, couple times during the night mentioned there was a small crowd outside, but it wasn't a big crowd.
Well, for example,
that's all CNN had on the streamer on the bottom of it.
Franklin, for example, the story about the IT aides, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, that is becoming a huge story that none of the regular media is covering.
I've seen it 25 times.
Nowhere near, Franklin. you see now we are getting stories out that they may have been routing national security secrets and selling it to the Russians and the Chinese. And Debbie Wasserman.
You haven't seen that from even Fox.
New York Post.
Okay.
New York Post is reporting that yesterday, that they routed committee information from the National Security Committee, from several of the top-ranking military and national security congressional committees to an outside server, and there are now stories that they may have been actually selling those to foreign intelligence services. That, if it was a Republican administration that did that, if it was Republican congressmen that protected them, would have been all over the news, and it's almost nowhere in the news. And where do, the president asked a good question, Franklin. Where do we stop with these monuments? I mean, you've literally got people now discussing whether the Washington Monument should be changed.
Why do we destroy history over a few people? These monuments have been here for years. I think there's some beauty
to
some of these
Jefferson Memorial has already announced that they're now going to go through a review process. They want to get ahead of this before people start demanding that they tear it down.
I would recommend that you read the editorial that John Meacham wrote about these monuments that got posted today, I think. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning historian from Chattanooga. Who pointed out that he grew up on Missionary Ridge, and differences that he sees between some of these monuments, and why he defends some of them and says other of them probably ought to go.
All right. Sheriff, we're getting close to the end. Sheriff, what's his name? Arpaio? Should he be pardoned?
No.
What did he do wrong?
Well, it's a little of nothing. I mean, it was a political persecution, to be honest.
Okay. Why shouldn't he be pardoned then?
Well, I'm not a big fan of pardoning
political
pardons across the board.
A political problem? You just said it was a political problem.
I said it was a political persecution.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean he
What did he do?
I don't even remember.
It has to do with treatment of people who are in jail, and then a court order directing him to do things, and his refusal to follow the court order, which is contempt of court.
But then again, I think President Clinton should have gone to jail for perjury. That's my problem. Franklin's all on Sheriff Arpaio, serving.
I didn't bring him up.
I know, but serving the letter of the law. But he was also all for letting Clinton off on perjury in a federal court. Mm-hmm. By the way, when we go down this road of who's good and who's bad based on the past, right. I just want to point out that President Obama's mother's family were slave owners and his father's family were slave traders. So I expect Franklin to oppose any monuments to Obama.
Well, let me read you something here.
Lay it on me.
This is written by a man named Achilles Clark, who was a soldier with the 20th Tennessee Cavalry, Confederate. The slaughter was awful. Words cannot describe the scene. The poor, deluded Negroes would run up to our men, fall upon their knees, and with uplifted hands scream for mercy. But they were ordered to their feet and then shot down. I, with several others, tried to stop the butchery, and at one time had partially succeeded. But General Forrest ordered them shot down like dogs, and the carnage continued. Finally, our men became sick of blood, and the firing ceased.
So?
Wars are I would ask.
Wars are horrible, Franklin.
Yeah, well,
and go to Missouri and Kansas, and you'll find the redlegs of the North were just as bad and they were butchering settlers.
Okay.
Franklin, I'm not saying it's not horrible. I'm not saying it's not reprehensible, but it's also 150 years ago. How, for example, what I just told you about Obama. Okay. Do we hold him responsible?
I'm going to go back to what I have been saying for weeks in here now. It's a perfectly valid argument to ask whether Nathan Bedford Forrest should be one of the 3 most honored people in the Tennessee State Capitol.
See, you've morphed from
No,
one thing
hold on, let me finish.
I didn't defend that.
Hold on. Well, that's what we're talking about there.
No, you weren't. You were reading us an account from a war.
And I was explaining why some people think that. So I think that's a legitimate thing. I think what we talked about earlier, a lot of these monuments should stay, but context ought to be added to them. And actual history. If you tell me you're about preserving history, don't run from history.
Of course, you also understand that the problem is who writes the history. And when you say
Subsequent
context,
generations always
when
write
you
the
say
history.
context, whose context? Howard Zinn's context?
Who?
Howard Zinn.
Oh. Well, history has been defined as that which every generation wants to remember about the past.
All right, we're running.
By the way,
late
there's a good example of this. It was called the Cultural Revolution in China.
All right, I just want everybody to remember to love America. Okay? We'll see you next week. Don't support the NFL this year. Bye-bye.
'Cause there ain't no doubt he'll fix this land. God bless Trump.